Week 4 of college football. Games on the field starting Thursday night. Also Friday, an interesting matchup, Nebraska, Illinois, and then on into Saturday, talking football on the field. This is something we dream about, hope for, look forward to, all of those good things the entire offseason. However, on this day, we will get back into court because that is the number one storyline in college football on this day. So we'll talk ACC over the next hour. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. This is the college football show that we present to you each and every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. And typically we will stay on for as long as you will want us to be on. And that's based on your support and contributions. On this day, however, each Wednesday, the Buckeyes live shows at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So 11 a.m. Eastern time on the Buckeyes show. So please join us there on the Ohio State channel. The Buckeyes play Marshall this weekend. Hopefully there will be a little bit more resistance on the other side facing Ohio State. We should probably not have college football teams that can play an entire month of September without playing a decent opponent. That would be one of my formulas to framing this sport going forward if I were commissioner or in charge of an advisory board over the sport. Before we get started on the sources concerning ACC reports today, I would like to address something. So we take pride in our community here at the Voice of College Football. So I'm not just talking about here on the main channel, but of course we've got a network of channels and shows all over the place. All right, so this is an open forum for college football discussion, debate, arguments, all of that. Welcome here at the Voice of College Football all the time. So the chat is to be used and not abused, and I gain a whole lot of satisfaction and contentment when I understand and hear of friendships that have been forged, relationships, all sorts of connections have been forged through our network here at the Voice of College Football. There's a number of people that contact me on a regular basis. I hear from different people and find out of different people that have been inspired by what we do in the past, and they've launched their own channels and have taken off based on what we've done here. But concerning the chat in particular, I often refer to this as the Voice of College Football community, the Voice of College Football community. So we are all about football first and foremost, not first and foremost in life, first and foremost here because it's a college football channel. Therefore, I would like for all of you to be free to discuss football at your heart's content. Part of that is something we call trash talking, right? We could give it all sorts of different names. That's certainly the most recent modern accepted term, trash talking, basically making fun of opposing teams, their issues, their problems, their struggles, or whatever. Okay. We come across this every so often, and the larger we grow, the more we're going to have these issues with there being some discrepancy between how we monitor the channels versus what is allowed and what we see, what we don't see. To put it into context, it should generally be black and white. Like most things in our society, there should be a right and a wrong, but there is a gray area. Of course, there is perspective there. So first and foremost, let me just assure everyone that our number one rule basically lines up with YouTube standards. And regardless of the YouTube guidelines and standards, which of course we have to adhere to, we would have these standards anyway. We don't want any attacks on anybody concerning their race, their religion, their sex, gender, politics, anything like that. So all of those hot button issues are not allowed. If anybody makes a comment in that way, maybe if it's in the political arena and it doesn't cause a stir and it's the only one made, I'm not going to throw that person to the curb automatically. The other issues pretty much warrants an ejection immediately. Okay, let's get past that because that's not been an issue and hopefully won't be. It has been at times in the past, but we have had some incidents here recently, and I just want to assure everyone that you can trash talk. And again, we all have different definitions of trash talk. So the conversation should, number one, not be personal in nature. Secondly, we would expect that even though we all don't have our facts straight on what happened in games or what the records are, that you do your best to actually be factual. Or if you're just, hey, letting us know that Kansas sucks, okay, great. We don't need to hear it 15 times. All right, I cannot address every particular situation. I know that there are situations that go on because, hey, I'm doing 17 shows a week. So if you do the math, that means I'm sitting in this chair 35 hours a week, roughly. And so that doesn't even come close to or is a drop in the ocean compared to everything else that we have to partake in, meetings and communications and running a business. Okay, that takes up my time, even more so than sitting here or preparing to sit here to talk intelligibly, hopefully. So I cannot monitor every chat response, any response by the moderators, any kind of discipline that they hand out, or just letting people know that they need to be a little bit more respectful. I appreciate our moderators. I think that they do an excellent job by and large. Are they perfect? Of course not. Of course not. Am I perfect or anyone else? So they have to make judgment calls from time to time. They have all been, I just don't take on moderators and throw them out there. I take on moderators and I give them a clear step-by-step procedure in regards to what is allowed, what is not allowed, and how to deal with it. And then if there is a gray area to be resolved, then they bring that to me. Some people, meaning you viewers, our community here, come directly to me, and I have no issue with that. Please, MarkRogersTV at Gmail. You can always reach me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail if there is an issue. And usually we have been able to come to some resolution if there's an issue in regards to your freedom of speech. Man, if there's anything that I fight for and am an advocate for, and if there's anyone who is a proponent of, I don't know who would be higher on the list than me when it comes to freedom of speech. Now, there are some exceptions, of course. We've already addressed those. But we're talking football here. We should not have huge issues. You guys should be able to, and are allowed, let me make this clear, to talk football and to make reasonable football conversation and even trash talking. Michigan fans make fun of Ohio State. You beat them 3 years in a row. You should make fun of Ohio State. Have at it. In regards to making fun of hosts, guests, that sort of thing, I would rather you not. Me, I'm fair game. Go ahead, blast me all you want. Make fun of me in whatever way you want. I don't care. That's fine. I don't like to see that for my guests and for the other hosts. Some of them have made the same statement I have. Go to it. I don't care. Have fun with me. The only thing that I would ever take out of a chat concerning an attack on me would be some kind of, not even a personal attack, something that would be harmful, something violent, something perverted, something like that. Again, though, I'm going to focus on a recent dispute. And so, yes, you can talk college football. If you ever have an issue with where you think one of our moderators is overstepping the line and being too restrictive, please send this straight to me. Do not run from the community and just assume that because, you know what, it's kind of like churches. I've often heard this. If you're looking for the perfect church, you're not going to find it. So you might as well stop at this one. Of course, you're still looking for a great college football community. We have that here. It's not perfect. People like to have fun. People are passionate. That's one great aspect of our sport. People are passionate. So there will be passionate discussion. Therefore, some people can take a little bit more of that than other people can. Some people are thin-skinned. That's okay. The thin-skinned, you are welcome here as well. Maybe we will thicken your skin. There are also people that accuse others of being thin-skinned when those attacks are a little bit too egregious, a little too heavy. So much of this is about perspective, but when it comes to just simply talking college football, my goodness, we don't want to be a place where people are restricted based on their fan perspective or because we've got certain shows that are obviously rooted in a particular team. We are not blindly following teams. We are not blindly committing ourselves to teams and building communities that are completely oblivious to the real world, that their teams are not perfect, their programs are not perfect, their head coaches are not perfect, and that there is room for criticism and analysis. So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully you understand that we always do our best here at the Voice of College Football to provide a respectful forum for debate. I use that word all the time, discussion, because much of it's just discussion, doesn't get heated, doesn't get emotional, is not argumentative in any way. And then it gets to a debate place, and that's fine as well, because I love to debate, and that's why we're here as well. And analysis. Discussion, debate, analysis. I throw that term out there all the time. So we don't want to drift from that. We don't want to abuse those components of what we do here at the Voice of College Football, but we also are going to be full-fledged, focused, and immersed in discussion, debate, and analysis. We are not going to shy away or try to build some Pollyanna society where everything's just wine and roses. Regardless of how much you cherish your team, it's going to get trashed at some point by somebody. You can go 15-0 and win a national championship and still draw criticism of your program and your team. I know I'm making up a scenario that seems highly unlikely, but man, just consider that. Maybe a team could go 15-0, win the national championship, and still have reasonable cause to be criticized. I know that's just a hypothetical, but I came up with it. All right. So there are no holy grails here, including myself. So let's get after it. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And let's get to the news that is coming from the ACC. Not necessarily news, what I call this news, but we have solid confirmation reported on ESPN. I don't know who broke this necessarily, but I would have to say that in recent months, I've made the statement a couple times that this situation in court involving Clemson and Florida State versus the ACC, and the ACC versus Clemson and Florida State. Keep in mind, we've got 4 court cases going on at the same time. Has been awfully quiet. It has been awfully quiet. And today we found out why. And I thought this could be the case. So this is just preliminary, but let's get to it. Actually, first of all, I would love to get to the comments section to see if there's anything. Very good. That's good to know, Wet Blanket. Best mods in the genre. Okay. I got to admit, I fully expected for the comment section to be flooded, but it's not flooded. I guess everybody was just kind of sitting there listening, taking that in. Hopefully that's because your experience has been excellent here, and we only have an issue that pops up once in a while. All right, let's get to the ACC. Good morning, Joey. Good to see you. Reminding everyone, please smash the like button. Good to see Joey here West Virginia plays Kansas this week. That should be a pretty good ball game. And of course, West Virginia with 2 losses. However, non-conference losses. They are non-conference losses. Joey, we know you can flood the chat. There just weren't that many people watching, for one thing. So hopefully some people will catch up with that statement. And hopefully it will be the people that need to hear the statement. So this is a two-way street in regards to, we've had some violators on the chat side, on the viewer side. In our community, we've had some violators on the moderator side, because even though our moderators do an exceptional job, it is a difficult job at times. There are some close calls, some gray lines to navigate. And so our moderators at times err in the process. All right, let's get ourselves set up here. This is the College Football Show. I will remind everyone. And again, based on your contributions and support, we typically blast through the hour. But today we've got Buckeyes Live coming up. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. But how about this? ACC, Clemson, Florida State renew talks on revenue distribution. Okay, well, we knew that was going on anyway. But what could that prohibit, or what could that alleviate? Talks between Clemson, Florida State, and the ACC have ramped up in recent weeks. According to sources, on a proposal that would allot a greater share of revenue to schools based on brand valuation and television ratings, which has been public and has been news and discussion for months and months and months and months. So we already knew that Florida State and Clemson were looking for a different revenue distribution model that would not be equal, but would be equitable, would be fair based on the value of the programs through television ratings, which are, of course, equal the revenue. The revenue comes directly from the television ratings to a certain extent, as well as potentially alter the expiration of the league's grant of rights, which currently runs through 2036, in exchange for the Tigers and Seminoles dropping their lawsuits against the conference. Let's say those lawsuits were dropped today. How much money was wasted by these 3 entities? Wow. Hundreds of millions of dollars already, I gotta think. Maybe we're not in the hundreds of millions, but we're definitely in the tens of millions that have been wasted for a league and for 2 programs that are in so much need of their own stated need. I'm not proclaiming that. That's their proclamation, needing money. All the money that was wasted by Florida State and Clemson, potentially, and the ACC waging war and paying lawyers. Okay. According to multiple sources within the league, the conversations are preliminary and the sides are not close to an agreement. Okay, so they're just talking, saying, hey, and we know based on fairly recent reports here in the last couple months, that there's good reason for this. Of course, the ACC wants to keep the 2 schools. So their perspective on this, their stance has never changed, the ACC. Certainly, they're fighting to keep Florida State and Clemson. But the conversations represent a strong signal that Florida State and Clemson are open to remaining in the conference under more favorable financial terms. Is it really just about that? Or could it be that Florida State and Clemson have determined that their value in the marketplace, that their attraction to the SEC and the Big Ten is not quite as heavy and appealing as they thought it was? I don't know what type of research, what type of conversations, what type of connections, what type of meaningful dialect went on between Florida State and powers that be. I pick on Florida State to a certain extent because they led this charge. They have been the most vocal, but Clemson, of course, is in the same position at this point. How much they assumed? They're Florida State and Clemson. Florida State is one of the 10 to 15 biggest brands in the sport, whether you're looking historically, recent history, post 1980, or you're evaluating the current situation in college football in terms of winning, in terms of television ratings. People watch Florida State football. Clemson, of course, most of their success more recent and at a higher degree, much higher than Florida State, but more recent. But they've been a consistent football power in the top 15 to 20 for decades and decades themselves. But of course, more in that national championship range here in the last decade. And people watch Clemson football. The Florida State, now I can't speak on this definitively right off the top of my head, but we do a television rating series here at the Voice of College Football every offseason. And my recollection is that Florida State brings in more viewers than Clemson, but certainly they are the top two in the conference. But are they just simply reconsidering with no other basis here? Florida State and Clemson just reconsidering that, oh, maybe we can work things out. Maybe if the ACC changes the distribution model, maybe if those things happen, okay, maybe we can make amends. No, hogwash. No, that's not what happened here. That was already happening. The ACC had already committed to Florida State and Clemson and the entire league, of course. And while those two schools are going to be the beneficiary of a different revenue distribution, there are going to be schools. Of course, we're dealing with the same amount of money. So then we're going to have other schools that are going to be, I don't want to say penalized. They are going to have money taken away from them. It's not going to be to their benefit. So this was already on the table. This was already guaranteed by the ACC. This wasn't just a negotiation. The ACC said months ago, we are restructuring revenue distribution. And Florida State and Clemson did not flinch. They stayed in court. They kept their court cases going. So it's not like, wow, the ACC came up with a different plan. They're going to reward their top revenue schools and their TV attractions with a new plan to help keep them in the league. No, they had already told Clemson and Florida State that to begin with. Whenever that was, it was at least just after the end of last season. So it may have been even prior to that. And I believe my recollection is that the ACC had already given indication that they would review that they would review the value of each school, each football program and basketball program, and redistribute revenue. So if you believe in good faith, then they were going to follow through on that. But the ironclad, we are in the process of doing this, and we have committed to doing it. And whether that's 1% more or we're going to completely tear up the model of equal distribution, the ACC guaranteed that this would happen just after the end of last football season. And so that's not a change. In recent weeks, probably months now, of course, there was one article written in particular by Brett McMurphy in which he cited a number of presidents in the SEC and the Big Ten who said that Florida State in particular was not an option at this point, that they were discussing bringing in Florida State, but they gave strong indication that there were issues there, that there was pushback. So that's what's going on here, is that Clemson and Florida State, they are willing to talk to the ACC because they may not have a landing spot outside the Big 12, and going to the Big 12 may not be as favorable as keeping the ACC together. Clemson and Florida State obviously would be completely a fish out of water in terms of culture, brand, just how we perceive college football to be. Now, much of that has been torn to shreds anyway, with schools crisscrossing the country to get into conferences. But Clemson and Florida State would have the potential to rule the Big 12. They would certainly be the most popular brands. But is that what they want? Because the ACC distribution is still higher than the Big 12 as it stands right now. Okay. So we'll pick it up from here. The proposal, which was formulated by Clemson and Florida State and discussed by the league's presidents during Tuesday's regularly scheduled meeting, includes additional money going to schools with better rating success in football and basketball. So the proposal in terms of the nuts and bolts of this was just submitted by Clemson and Florida State. However, as I just stated a minute ago, there has been a guarantee made by the ACC that this will happen to some degree. While the proposal has not been widely distributed or discussed among conference athletic directors, administrators from more than a half dozen schools who spoke with ESPN said they would at least be open to some altered revenue split. That is going to be fascinating. I would love to see those figures. I would love to be in that room to see how that shakes out. Because if you truly get to the matter of valuations of these schools and these football programs and basketball programs, but that's probably going to be more like 10 or 15% of this equation. In football, 85 to 90% of this equation. I think some people out there believe that there is some kind of fairly balanced draw between these schools and a conference. So let's say it says later in the article here that that the ACC distributed an average of $44.8 million per school. And that if they, let's say they went to a solely TV ratings valuation driven model. Well, first of all, you can't fairly do that because Clemson and Florida State are given better TV venues. They are put on the better networks at the better time slots more often because of who they are. So it's kind of a cycle that they are given preference because of their perceived and real value. So the networks want them on the better time slots and on the better networks. But then because they are on the better networks during the better time slots, then that accentuates their TV ratings. So that has to be addressed. I'm sure that it is. I'm sure that somebody in the room is smart enough to know that the ratings and the television difference that we see is not solely Clemson and Florida State being as popular as they are. It's mostly that is the basis for most of that separation between Clemson, Florida State, and the rest of the ACC. And of course, there are levels and layers to this. Miami is close, Louisville is close, and it goes on down the line. But again, that is perpetuated and accentuated by the preference that Clemson and Florida State are given by the networks because they are worth more. but then they are worth even more because they are placed on the big networks at the best times. In 2022-2023, the ACC distributed an average of $44.8 million per school. Say what you want about the grant of rights. If nothing else, at least it has a growing number. It was escalated. It's an escalated contract. It wasn't just a flat, we signed a 10-year deal for $200 million, $20 million per year, boom, 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 boom. It was 10 years, 200 million. Those are false figures, everyone. It's just an example. 10 years, 200 million. And we're going to start at 12 million, then go to 14. And then by the end, even though it's 10 years for 200 million, an average of 220 million per, then it becomes 28, 32 million by the end of it. If nothing else, to combat inflation. So roughly $7 million less than the SEC per school. However, that difference is expected to grow to more than $30 million when accounting for the SEC's new television contract, which began this year. I wonder why this ESPN article does not cite the Big Ten's revenue. Why would the ESPN/Disney article not cite, why cite the SEC only? Why would we do that? Okay. If we're going to write a complete article, then why don't we cite the Big Ten contract? Could it be because ESPN and Disney have nothing to do with the Big Ten anymore? And they would have to possibly use the word Big Ten and use the word Fox in their article and also post a number that is higher than the SEC's. That could be. But even if so either this was an agenda item, as 99% of what we read in news is now. There's some kind of political slant to it. There's some kind of agenda-driven process in the background, or maybe it's not even that shadowed. It's obvious. These journalists have become activists. I'm not saying that these particular ones are, but most journalists out there are now activists. But here, there's no mention of the Big Ten, and those numbers are public. That would serve the viewer. So either that was a miss on the part of the two writers here. Okay, we're going to go with three different possibilities here. David Hale and Andrea Adelson. Either they messed up and they should have included that, or they willfully excluded the Big Ten contract with Fox, CBS, NBC. Or number three, there was some good reason that I am not thinking of that maybe somebody else could bring to light. Florida State Athletic Director Michael Alford has called the forthcoming revenue gap an existential threat, and he pushed for the ACC to divide revenue unequally during the league's 2023 spring meetings, asking for more money to go to schools that had success on the field as well as those that drew the highest ratings for television. So yes, I believe this is going to be a combination that's pretty clear what's stated there, highest TV ratings, which again, you need somebody in the room that understands the context of the TV ratings, not just, Florida State averages 3.9 million viewers per game and Wake Forest averages 930,000 viewers per game. There you go. That's the percentage difference. Boom. Number one, I would expect that at least 50%, if not the bulk of this revenue distribution would stay equal. Let's say we bring in $1 billion right now, and we now distribute it equally to everyone, which has been 14 schools in the past. We now have Stanford, Cal, and SMU who makes nothing. So just for rough figures, let's say we get 10 schools in a conference and they bring in $1 billion. In the past, we have divided that equally, $100 million per school. Now, instead of just saying, okay, we're going to look at TV ratings and then divide it up and come up with all these calculations based on TV rating success, because that's what drives the ad revenue that comes to the conference that makes us a value to the networks, that they will probably take at least half of that revenue and just say, this half is equally distributed. Now let's deal with the other half. Or it could be more complex than that, where it becomes 52% or 59% is going to be split equally. And then we're going to deal with the other 40%, 41%, whatever it turns out to be. 13%. And we're going to base that on TV ratings. Now, football success or success on the field or on the court, how is that going to be measured? Well, either that is simply going to have to do with those teams advancing to the NCAA basketball tournament and advancing to the college football playoff, and then that being determined, okay, well, the league makes this much money based on the college football playoff appearance of just the one team that made it or the two teams that make it, and we're going to give them a larger percentage of that because they obviously were the ones that achieved it. I think that's totally fair. Again, I don't think it should be an all or nothing. We made the college football playoff, and I believe the revenue distribution, from what I remember going forward, starting this season, is $21 million to the Big Ten schools and the SEC schools, $21 million, $13 million, and $12 million to the ACC and the Big 12 in some. Either one gets 13, the other gets 12, or vice versa. I forget which is which. It doesn't matter. It's about 13 million for the SEC, for the ACC and the Big 12, and Notre Dame gets 5, which is kind of ridiculous if they don't make it. But anyway, so that's the distribution split, which on the surface doesn't seem like a big deal. And we've addressed this many times. Does not seem like a big deal on the surface. Okay, every school in the Big Ten gets 21 million. Every school in the SEC gets 21 million from the CFP. And the Big 12 and the ACC schools get 13 million. That's not that big a deal, is it? Well, 21 million times 34 teams in the Big Ten and the SEC. 13 million times 33 teams in the ACC and the Big 12, that's a disparity of 8 million per team, per school. 8 times 30, some $250 million difference per year. 8-year contract, $1.7 billion difference between the ACC and the Big 12 and the SEC and the Big 10. $1.7 billion difference in the course of 8 years in revenue from the CFP. That is crazy. That is crazy. That's how much more value there is with the SEC and the Big 10. $1.7 billion. Of course, I'm using rough figures. I could be off by 100 million. But roughly $1.7 billion over the course of 8 years difference between those two leagues and these two leagues. Crazy. This is the first time in the history of college football, I believe in the history of college athletics, that the major conferences, whatever those major conferences to be, at times that included the Pac-12, of course, and will in the future, apparently. And in the past, that has included the Big East. These conferences have always worked together and distributed revenue equally until now. Until now. Fascinating. All right, so here we get to it. The league ultimately agreed to institute a new revenue sharing policy dubbed Success Initiatives that would reward programs that made bowl games, the college football playoff, or the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournament with a higher share of postseason revenue. But at the time, ADs were not interested in any plan that included brand evaluation or television ratings, too. Well, not until two of your schools are going to leave. In the months that followed, however, Florida State and Clemson filed lawsuits against the ACC in an effort to extricate themselves from the league's grant of rights, which binds each member's media rights to the ACC through June of 2036. The ACC countersued both parties in North Carolina. To date, little movement has occurred on the legal front, and should the cases go to trial, a final resolution to the lawsuits could still be years away, according to attorneys for all sides. As part of a judge's ruling in Leon County, Florida, the sides were required to enter into mediation, which is when discussions about ratings-based revenue splits took on new life. Within the proposal put forth by Clemson and Florida State, the term of the grant of rights would be also reduced potentially as early as 2030 to better fall in line with the expiration of TV deals in the Big 12 and the Big 10. While the basic talking points of the proposal had some support within member schools, there were significant questions about the details. Heck yeah, there would be. I just brought up a major one in terms of determining the fairness of television ratings when certain teams are given preference. As one athletic director who supported the general idea noted, properly evaluating something like TV ratings can be difficult. Yes, with numerous outside factors influencing kickoff times, networks, and ratings share that may not directly reflect a program's value. All right. That's what we're talking about. So, Ohio State and Marshall play. I'm just bringing up this one particular game because it's kind of an odd game to be on, I believe, the noon Fox game. I believe that's the case this Saturday. Okay. Why did Fox put Ohio State and Marshall on their network as a main game? Well, because Ohio State draws a lot of people regardless of who they're playing. There you go. It has nothing to do with Marshall. It has something slightly to do with Marshall that they could be a little bit more competitive than Akron. But it has almost nothing to do with Marshall. It has everything to do with Ohio State in this example. However, less people would watch that game if it was on FS1. Less people would watch if it was on ESPNU or the Big Ten Network. So there are people that just watch football games because they flip on the TV and they watch the Saturday night game on NBC. They watch ESPN all day. They just watch college football on ESPN all day. Whatever the habit, that's what it is. So, as David is saying here, Ohio State Marshall does seem to be Big Ten Network material. Of course it does. And let me just take a shot at this. I would say that the difference between this game being on the Big Ten Network and Fox would be maybe the difference between 3 million viewers and 1.2 or 1.5. Do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We talk football all day, all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. 17 live streams for just this kid, just me. 17 live streams I host every week. We're going to do something about that at some point, but that's going to be to the benefit of you. So anyway, 17 live streams just for me. And then we've got others all over the place. I don't know what our live stream count is up to per week, but it's got to be 30. All right, back to the article. Several administrators who did not support the proposal did admit there was a potential incentive to continue discussions if it helped ensure the future of the conference. Aha! Yes, Wake Forest, Syracuse, they're going to say, we didn't initially support it, but we're losing our two biggest brands and we may implode. So we now understand that to ensure the future of the conference, for the foreseeable future, with one noting that it would be better than seeing the ACC fall apart completely. And another suggesting a brand-based revenue split could be inevitable for every league as TV contracts continue to grow and leagues continue to expand. Oh, can you see that revenue distribution split in the Big Ten or the SEC going forward if they go to some kind of model like this? Whoa. I'm surprised it hasn't happened already. My goodness. The disparities there. The ACC is also in talks with ESPN, which holds an exclusive option to extend the league's television contract from 2027 through 36. ESPN must pick up or decline the option by February 2025. The ACC declined to comment on the status of discussions on changes to the revenue distribution model, but in May, Commissioner Jim Phillips said he was open to all options that would secure the league's standing. You have to stay optimistic, Phillips said, and you work through these things. We'll manage what we have to manage. And I'm always optimistic about a really good ending out of this situation. I won't change until somebody else tells me different, but I am going to fight for the ACC. Absolutely. That's my responsibility. Yes, it is. Jim Phillips, for all the knocks on his stay as commissioner, absolutely. He is being paid by the ACC. He is responsible for the ACC and nothing else. And that's one of the big ills of college football, college athletics in general, but college football is that there is no one to look out for the entire sport. These commissioners are not paid to look out for the sport. They are not paid to do what is best for the sport. They are paid to do what is best for their respective league, make the most money, enhance our image, our brand, our reach, our potential. And if we have to tear up 3 other leagues to do it, that's what we'll do. Even though that's bad for college football, that's not bad for our league. And I am being paid, Tony Petiti, Greg Sankey, Brett Yormark, Jim Phillips, to represent my league. And so these issues in college football generally stem from that. I would say that the issues in our sport stem from 2 basic things. The number one, and of course, it's a lot more complicated and complex than this, but I'm just going to cite 2 enormous sources of adversity, problems, issues. Number one, that there is no commissioner, there is no governing body. The NFL does not fight with itself to progress the sport and advance the sport. The NFL is they're not perfect, but they're as close as what we have in American sport. The NFL does almost everything right. Everything that's substantial, they do it right. Not talking politically, some of the stupid activism and things that they've attached themselves to. I hate the NFL in many ways for the crap that they support. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about running a business. So while the NFL, yes, is, man, a lot of words went through my head that I'm not going to say. A little distorted, perverted in certain ways. When it comes to running a business, the NFL does it right. The NFL acts in the best interest of the NFL, not the NFC East, not the AFC North. No, they all work together, do what's best for the NFL. In college football / athletics, the SEC does what's best for the SEC, and the Big Ten, and the Big 12, and so forth. They all act on their own self-interest. The COVID year was a perfect lab experiment for us to see play out. They all did different things for different reasons. Some of them followed others. We saw who the leaders were and who the followers were and where the priorities lie. In the SEC, it was, we are playing football. And now we're going to figure out the safety measures, the health measures that we need to take, whatever it takes. We're playing football. Now we'll figure out the rest. The Big Ten was in the mode of, we're going to figure out how bad all this is, and then we'll decide if we're going to play football. And then Kevin Warren made the big mistake of saying, we're not going to play football. No, we can't. It's too unsafe. Sorry, son, who plays at Mississippi State. You're going to play football. But anyway, it's too unsafe to play football. And then they had to retract that. And of course, they played a season in the Big Ten because there was the greatest disparity between the thought process and the priorities of the administrators, the chancellors, the presidents, the academia, and then the common man, the players, the coaches, the fans. There you see the great conflict in the Big Ten. It was fascinating to watch because the SEC, everybody's on board. I'm sure there's dissenters here and there, but everybody's on board in the SEC. Then the Pac-12, everybody's on board on the other end of just basically, this is a worldwide pandemic. We can't do anything about it. We're not playing football. It's not that important. Nobody cares. Of course, people care. Not enough, though. We're not playing football. And then when they see everybody else is playing football and most of the games are being played, okay, then they start playing like 4 games. How stupid was it for Utah and Arizona State and these schools to play 4 games? What did that accomplish? It got back some money. That's why they played the games. It resulted in no championships in the Pac-12 that were meaningful. One team went to a bowl game. One team went to a bowl game, Oregon. Nobody else played in a bowl game from the Pac-12 because they all had somewhat invalid records. Anyway, and then the SEC or the ACC and the Big 12 basically followed the SEC and did what the SEC did. They just followed the SEC lead. They just took their marching orders, did the same thing. Oh, the SEC is going to do it that way. We'll do it that way. 2020 was fascinating to see that play out. The Big Ten, the most conflict. The Pac-12 withered up into a ball and was insignificant. The SEC, boom, playing football. Let's do our best to get our house in order to figure out how to manage all this. But we're going to play football. Then the ACC and the Big 12 followed the SEC. Fascinating. Found that interesting. All right, folks. Wow, it's 10:56. We're starting our Buckeye show in 5 minutes here at the Voice of College Football. So head on over to the Ohio State channel. It's time for Buckeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Let's see. Today it's Ohio State at 11, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7, Notre Dame at 8. That's with me hosting. We've got the Mountaineer Locker Room show at 8 o'clock Eastern time as well. Clemson Live's at 8. 3 screens at 8. Notre Dame, Clemson, West Virginia. There you go. We'll see you in 5 minutes on the Buckeyes channel.